So we're going to talk about Customizer today, and as many of you may or may not know, Customizer is a way of manipulating the NAS 500 to do quite a few different things, from validating data on a screen using DB script to adding fields, or even just changing the tab formats within MAS 500, so how certain screens operate. That's all handled in MAS 500 under a module called Customizer. And if you guys don't already have it, you can purchase it. Just get in contact with the consultant that supports you, and we can definitely get a bid out. If you go into the Customizer module within MAS 500, there is a function called Manage Form Customizations. So much like everything else in MAS 500, Customizer itself is specific to your companies and to your users. So when you have customizations that get posted out into MAS 500, you will find that you can see a group, a user, or a company where that customization will be applied. If you do have integrations to other products that are plugged into MAS 500, you may go into this Manage Form Customizations area, and you may see that they have their own little hooks into MAS. So, for example, on this screen, you'll see the word all that simply says customization has been applied to all users, and then there's a specific user for a specific company who has a customization that's been set up. So it just lets you know that there's inherent flexibility in Customizer to present and sort of customize just a specific look and feel based on a user or user group. Within the Manage Form Customizations, before we get into the fun that is utilizing the product, you have the ability to activate it and then activate it. I don't know why they chose pins, but they decided that would be the representation. I always have to hover because I never remember which one does what. So, you know, I guess the one that looks to the side is disable, unpin, and pin. You can also delete form customizations, and that can be done with the X. The best thing to note as you're going into form customizations is these modify the behavior pattern within MAS 500. And like anything else, when we go in and we make changes, even if they seem to be small and inconsequential, and then a group of individuals starts complaining about a behavior, like I modified the maintain items screen, and then all of a sudden when someone goes into maintain items, things are to the left and the description is gone and all these. You may not have touched that, but something has happened. So usually after you make form modifications, have your users go through and test them as a best practice. But also, if you hear complaints, this is a good place to go because it's going to tell you very specifically which module, what screens, what's going on. Maybe you didn't modify it, maybe someone else in your organization modified it, but you can highlight those, turn off those customizations, and then test to make sure things are going well. You do have the ability to import and export form customization. So again, if you have a large conglomerate with multiple locations, you could do a customization on a dev system and move it over into the live system using the import and export. I won't really go through those, but it's a lot of fun. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start on something really, really simple, which is in accounts payable. Everyone loves data entry. So I'm going to just take a look at modifying something as simple as the voucher process, which to me is the one thing that when I'm working with my clients ends up getting manipulated 9 ways from Sunday. And it doesn't get manipulated in the add data arena. It gets manipulated in this is how my people enter things. So this is how I want tab stops to work. So when we go into the enter voucher screen, at the very top on the far upper right-hand corner, we're going to see this little star next to a nice form screen that's turning on the customizer. So when we click that button, the system is going to pop up a nice little window. And of course, as I'm using this, I have 2 screens, so it's shoving everything off to one screen. So I'll keep going off to the side. When I go in, I'm going to see this form customization window pop up. I'm going to sort of move my windows so they're next to each other. And what I'm going to have is a couple buttons that I like to point out. So the first thing that we're going to do is just simple tab stops. This little widget that looks like a, I never have a good name for all these buttons, what they're meant to be. I see it as a flow diagram. This is where we can set the customization level. So as a manager, I would come in and I would say, listen, for every company within my organization, which would be the entire site, this is how I want the sucker to work. Or I can go down and say, listen, for these companies that I've set up, I simply want this customization to work for this company. Or it can be specific. For this user, here's Josh Gettman, in this company, this is how I want this customization to happen. So again, this is sort of where we set up at the very beginning where we're going to do work. Once you start your work, it's impossible to change it on the screen without saving it. And the best thing that you can always do is promote it, which is something that we can go through if you ever do get into that issue. But most of the time, once I have this level set, I do all my customizations. I can leave it at a user level, and then I can go back to the form customizations interface, and I can promote that, which simply says take it from a very specific level where I've tested it for Josh at just one company, and move it up to the highest level, the site, the group, the company. I can get sidetracked really easy on all the cool stuff, so again, if you have questions like, let's move on faster, just say it. So once I change the customization level and I just sort of confirm that it's going to do what I want, all I have to do is click on the first field, and there's going to be a wonderful thing that gives me a tab index. At the same time, there are some settings here that allow me to enable the visibility on this particular thing. So you can actually just turn stuff off so that it doesn't even show up on the screen. I've seen people turn off like reason codes because someone was doing it, or the hold payment function because that's being held by your credit card processing and you don't want it displayed. But I can say, for example, when my clerks go to do entry, they're going to enter the vendor. Then the next thing I want them to do is go from vendor, which I'm starting at. So I'm going to say this is tab stop number 6. Then I want to enter the vendor invoice number, so I'm going to make that number 7. I'm changing that over here. Then I want them to enter in the invoice date, so I want that to be number 8. And then I want them to select the payment terms, and that's number 9 in my process. And once I'm done, I'm going to click Save. So what I've done is I said, when I get on the screen, tab starts at vendor, then it's going to go to the invoice, that's number 7. Then it's going to go down here to the invoice date, that's number 8, and then it's going to go to the payment terms, number 9. Now, just to be aware, when you're doing customizations, there's always going to be these fun little defaults that Mass likes to have. You cannot start at the voucher because once you tab out of this screen, if you notice this is number 4, by default the system brings focus to the vendor. So if you're worried about what I mean by bring focus, it just means that when you create a new transaction over here, and I'm going to exit out of my customization because it's been applied. So by default, I can choose the type, I hit tab, and notice that the first thing that Mass does is move right over to the vendor. So when you're on a screen, if you're not sure where the first starting point is of that screen, just start the transaction, and wherever the cursor goes, that's where you're going to go. So now I'm going to enter in my vendor information, whatever that may be, and let's hope that there's something out there for me. I'm going to hit my lookup, either clicking the F5 key or the wonderful little magnifying glass. It's going to pull my lookup of all my vendors, and I'm going to select one. And now it's my vendor invoice number, my amount, and oops, I forgot to save something. And isn't it always fun when you're going through and showing people stuff that you messed up? 6, 7. So this should be 7. Save.
And Josh, does that work when you change your user to be able to use the enter key instead of the tab key?
I'm sorry?
Does that work when your user uses the enter key instead of the tab key, that setting on user preference?
Yeah, so use enter as tab?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah, that is inherent, so it'll work at the same.
Okay, thank you.
For those wonderful 10-key people, I love you. Okay, so let's make sure that now, boop, okay. You know, sometimes if you click the save key, always a good, point to learn. So now I enter my amount, then I can change and I can add in the invoice number or the dates or something. Oh, good heavens. And then my terms. After that, note that in Customizer, you would have to go through each one of these tabs. So again, on the details of, I just modified how the system is going to work when I'm in Enter Vouchers, this main screen. So as long as I'm on the Header tab, this is how it's going to go down. When I'm on the Details tab, you would need to activate Customizer again if you want to look through. So on this screen, I'm going to go and I'm going to actually activate this. So if I'm on Header, and I hit Control-D or Alt-D for my details, and then I hit Tab, the first thing that it goes to is my target company. So I know that this is the landing spot from which all customization should happen. So I can simply go and click my Customizer, and again, I can go back to this because I know that when I went to that tab, that's where it went first. I can say, okay, great. The first thing that's going to happen at tab stop number 66 is the target company. Next, I want them to go here and enter the actual description. This is now going to become 67. So then you can go down and say, well, now I wanted to switch over, and you can continue on. Now I want it to go to unit cost. I'm going to go with 68. And then I want it to go here to this OK button, and that's 69. Make sure that I took, 68, 69, and then click Save. So now in my Details tab, I can now go for my header, which I was down here at my prepays. I'm going to automatically pop over to my Details tab, clicking Alt-D, and now it's going to go through that process I set up. So from target company to the entry, to the unit cost, and then to the OK key. So you're really modifying the method by which information is changing on the screen. And this is pervasive, so you can do this throughout all of NAS 500 data entry screens. The ones that I'm a little bit query on, I just don't like modifying, and Donna can speak a little more to this maybe because she and Becky have huge experience with sales order. When it comes to sales order, if there are problems, just give us a call. Call your consultant and ask it. Sales order screens have a lot going on. And so if you're trying to modify the grid entry, or any of those fun things, Customizer may not be the method by which to do that, or you may find some unintended consequences as far as behavior. So it's not because you've done something wrong, it's just some inherent complications within Sage. Donna, would you add anything to that?
On the reason that it's a problem is because within this grid here, like on your example, you have the target company and item in the grid, that in the sales order module, you can rearrange the grid to your preference.
Right.
So that's why the sales order module or that screen becomes a little difficult to nail down because you're looking at the first cell in the grid. On this example is target company. The second piece of the grid would be item, and then the sales order, depending on how your setup is and what you choose, you could have item first or description first or whatever you'd like to do. And then there's a lot of times that within the grid, there's fields that you don't see that may be the first field in the grid. So as a rule, trying to get into the grid, you can't get there with the customizer. There are ways around it, but it becomes difficult to get into the grid.
So that's our only big caveat to this is if you're in sales order, reach out to someone within your consultant and ask that question. And as you can tell, we all have sort of areas of expertise, and we have definitely run into issues. So I'm always looking out for or speaking with the other consultants because I just know that there's other expertise out there when there are certain areas that I just don't like touching. Yeah. And sometimes I'm just a pain and I really don't want to touch it, so I'm like, Donna, you're masterful. Just take care of this.
Now, the only other thing that I would warn them about is on a command button. If you were to go ahead and put a command button or if you hit that little ellipse button on project.
Yep, this one here.
If you click that guy.
Hold on just a second. And he's not going to let me get in here.
Right. Okay, there you go. And if you click the little ellipse button there.
It's not letting me in. I believe I deactivated it because of the problems that we were having.
Okay. In the ellipse, when it does that little dot button or a command button, the reason you can't do anything with Customizer in that little command box is because 99% of the time you're actually bringing up another screen.
Very true.
So what you'll need to do is to simply click the command box or the little command button and then hit Customizer. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
And what we're speaking of is that once you get to the ellipse, if you click on the ellipse, you can't get into the ellipse. So Customizer is activated on the window that you're working with. So if there's something on the window, you have to have the window open and active before you click the Customizer button. And once in Customizer, you cannot open up those active windows. So if there's a lookup window and you want to modify something in that lookup window would have to be activated. Yes?
Correct.
Okay. So that is, at a high level, the fun portion about just simply changing tab stops. And you can reorganize those throughout all of NAS 500. I think a lot of you, how many people have actually done that? Julie, Keith, Chris?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, this will be the first entry, and it's a good thing to do because your data entry people will love it. So I'm going to exit out this in order to show the next portion of Customizer, which is adding additional fields within MAS 500. And we're going to stick with accounts payable, and we're going to go into our vendors. So how many people here are comfortable with SQL? Anyone? Is that Keith?
Yeah.
You're dangerous. You're not comfortable. Just kidding. Okay, so all SQL is at a very high level is a lot of like Excel documents shoved into a thing called a database. So when you consider adding and doing additional information in MAS 500 through Customizer, the thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to place all that information somewhere. And that's what this process is doing. It's basically creating a location where we're going to store that information. And you can look in MAS 500 and go into the, oh, I can hear myself talking. It's driving me crazy. You can go into MAS 500 and look at our database browser, and it will show you the tables that you're close to or where you'll be modifying. So that will help you choose where to put your information. So what I do is you would need either your database administrator or yourself to go in and create that location where we're going to actually store data actively in the database that is going to then be updated on the screens within MAS 500. So I'm logging into the database. By default, most of them are called MAS 500_APP. And underneath the tables is really the location where we'd add information. So I'm going to go to what I know is the vendor table. So a lot of the information within the database is actually stored very logically. So T stands for table, AP stands for accounts payable. T is table, AR is accounts receivable. So it follows a logical path. And out here that we have a vendor table that stores all of our vendor information. So when I want to make an addition, don't change the existing table. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new table. And I just right-hand mouse click, and I click on New Table. Now, there's only one field that is required, in order to make this process work. And at the top of the columns in the TAP vendor table, which is the one that we want to use because we're storing additional vendor information, there's this little thing that looks like a key. And that is our primary key. And we need that to be identical in the new table that we create. So this right here says that it's a VEN key. I'm going to use the exact same name, VEN key. This says I'm going to be using an integer. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to find the integer. I'm going to add the integer. And I don't want it to be null. And if I right-hand mouse click on this, I can set it as primary key. So now these are two things are identical. And if you were standing right next to my desk, I would be pointing towards the screen to show you that this is identical to that. So just imagine. Then I'm going to add some additional information that I want to be able to track within Mass 500. So let's say I am just saying is international. And I'm going to store yes or no. So I'm going to say it's a varchar, which just is simply saying it could be a number, it could be text, it could be any amount, and 10. One thing I did do is I put a space, is international. You really shouldn't do spaces. Actually, it's best that you don't. If you want to separate it, we can always use the underline button, which is shift and then the button to the left of plus or equal, so you can say is underscore international. So anyone who's dealt with emails, you can do that. And then maybe I'll put in a long name because the vendor name in Mass 500 is limited, and I want that to now be able to go out to 255 characters, and I don't want it to have an issue. So I'm going to ask if they're international, and then I'm going to have this long name populate up. I'm going to save this table. What I highly recommend is that you save it very similar to what we have in Mass 500. So we put in TAP, we add the name vendor, and then I'm going to use that underscore. And what I recommend is if you're doing this internally, use some 3 characters that represent your organization. So I always like to put ISM so that I know that it's mine, and then EXT for extension. The table names can be as long as you want. I'm going to tell you right now, and again, I'm pointing towards the screen. The drop-downs in Mass 500, when you go to select these tables, are not really very wide. And so if you name your table name really, really long, it can get very confusing because you may only see TAP vendor /I. So the longer the name, the less likely you'll be able to see this sucker in the Mass 500. I'm going to click OK, and the system now has saved that table. Now in order for, if you look here, the table hasn't displayed on my screen, so I'm going to have to pop up here. I'm going to right-hand mouse click, and I'm going to click refresh on the actual database so that the tables pop up. Now notice that I have a lot of tables. This is just a slight SQL tip. If I click on the tables heading, the little folder, I go up here to the filter, and I type in TAP vendor as a limit to the name, which is the table name, and I click OK. Now it's just going to give me my 2 tables and tell me that things are filtered, so I don't have to look at everything if I know that I'm just dealing with these 2. The last portion is the security portion. This is just simply making sure that we provide the access that the system needs in order to write information in and out of this table. So if I right-hand mouse click on the table and I go down to properties, I'm going to be able to go down to permissions, and it will tell me what permissions by default are applied to the system table in Mass 500, and that's the application DB role. And right now, it has the ability to delete, to insert, to reference, to select, and to update. You can leave this screen open, fortunately, so you don't have to remember all this information. Then you can right-hand mouse click on the table that you just created, select properties. And we're just going to have to mirror those property sets in order to make sure that we don't have any permission issues. If you forget to do this step, people may go in to do work within the screen and it will start wigging out. So I'm just going to type the word application into the check name area. It's going to pop up this little screen, and I'm going to say application DB role and click OK. then it's going to now, if you're looking here, it's just I'm just mirroring information. This seems like a lot of setup, but once you get used to it, holy crud, it goes by so quickly, it's insane. So all I'm going to go in here is I'm going to say, yep, it can delete, it can insert, it can reference, select, and update. Delete, insert, reference, select, update. DIRSU, D-I-R-S-U. Okay. Click OK, and the system is saved as permissions. And we're done in SQL. So that's all you need to know of SQL. Once you've created that table, you can add more fields, as many fields as you want. So it's not like you have to create a new table for each modification. You just have to create one and then use it for all the others. So back on my vendor screen, I'm now going to click my little customizer button. It comes up. I'm going to click out, and I'm going to say that this is a site change. Again, I'm selecting my customization level from the little workflow. And now I'm going to start doing some work. First, I can click on the whole screen. And if you look at it, we sort of get this highlight around it. We can actually make screens larger and smaller within Mass if we want. So just because there isn't room on the screen doesn't mean we can't click into that area and using the little drag tools make it bigger or make it smaller. So the customizations are not limited to just, gee, do I want to add a field? You can modify the screen size and what's visible. And I'm just going to use this space right here that has, I always like to see what else is out there. Okay, this is in the maintenance screen. Cool, I'm going to pop this up a little bit, give myself some room. And then I'm going to go out here to this little controls function. And this bad boy brings up this little bar that says, what type of control do you want to add? And we have masked edit screens, we have labels. This is something you're going to learn over time. So as you have specific needs, reach out to us. This is why we're here. We're here to support you and make your company better. So all we're going to do is I selected this mass edit tool because I want people to be able to put in a name. I always like to rename these. And if you're curious about what the name should be, you can always click on another one like this one, text vendor name. So I can go and rename this and mirror, so TXT vendor, vend long name. And I can go in here and I can say, you know, is this a password, is it not? And there's a lot of behaviors here. If you click the question mark to help, it will talk you through all of these. Really, until you have a need, giving this information to you would just be overwhelming, as I'm sure so far we're hitting. So what I'm going to do now is I've clicked on this data binding. This is me telling the system where we're going to store this information. So if you remember, we put in tap vendor. You can actually type into the screen, which is nice, tap V-E-N-D-O-R, and then we will, oh crud, did not refresh. Tap TV. Doop, doop, doop. I may need to go out of the screen and back into it. Because our new table should, so this is something that I've done before. Fortunately, I'm really good at this. I'm in a play environment, not the live environment, so I just added that wonderful table into the wrong location, and so it's not pulling up in my screen. So I am going to really quickly populate it into my new, into my play environment, and then I'll remove it from the old. So just don't pay attention to this little thing as Josh like puts right into play 500. Play. And then I'm going to delete this bad boy because I don't want it in my actual production areas. So I create a play table, and now if we go into tab vendor, oh, I'm going to have to refresh this. And we're going to go into delete, insert, select, update. Boom. And we're done. Woohoo! See how fast that was? When you do this enough, it just becomes so simple. So now I'm going to go through that process again. So on YouTube, you will have a little pause, and then you get to do it all over again. First thing I'm going to do is make sure that my customization level is set correctly. And then I'm going to click my control toolbox, and I'm going to add a text field here to this top. I'm going to extend it out to where I want. And I'm going to go right into data binding, click the drop down, and type TAP vendor. Come on, TAPVNDOR. And voila, my new table is there. And I'm going to link this into the long name. So this is the column in that table that's going to be updated. And then by default, the system is going to pull in the parent table for me, which is great. Then I open up this little relationship screen. And this is why I name things the same, so that there's no confusion over drawing that line. It's almost like Crystal Report's Visual Designer, where we can just sort of see the data. So I don't ever recommend you using different keys when relating back to a specific table in math that you're trying to mirror. So just use VenKey, make sure I did this correct, and clear relationship, VenKey, come on. VenKey to the, oh, for the love of Peter. I'm having a lot of fun today, because this should go this to this. I'm going to do it the other direction. Boop. And it's not going to let me. Boop. Thank you, goodness. And then I'm going to click and save this customization, and I'm going to exit out. So if I type in a vendor, any old vendor here, I'm just going to look up vendors. Boop, 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 boop. I can put in GE capital long name. Click my save key, GEC. If I go back to GEC01, there we have GE capital, and we have our long name. Now, when you add these, they don't automatically get added into other aspects. So usually you have a specific need. So it's going to update on a report, a form, or something else. So when you use Customizer to add information into Math 500, just realize that if you're trying to add that so you can view it in your Insights Explorer, voucher lookup, or vendor lookup, by default, Math is not going to bring those, but it's fairly simple, and we can definitely walk you through the process of then using that information in custom reports or in forms or in Explorer views. And once you get the gist of how that is added in down, it's fairly simple. Of course, because we have added it to the screen. Go ahead.
What about the UDFs? Those
yes?
6 defined fields, how does that long name relate, or does it not relate to those 6 custom fields you can put in?
Yeah, so these are completely new fields. So when you have user-defined fields like in all of Math 500, those are limited to a specific character length. And they're very flexible. So this is really, once you've exhausted that as an option, and now I have more user-defined fields that I want to put in, I have more data that I want to have in here, I have check marks that are going to be used throughout a process or in a form. So this is all the information that Math just doesn't capture well, and I've run out of user-defined fields, or, and this is a big or, the user-defined field that's there is just not going to work, like with a long name. It just is never going to, it's not good to modify that source in Math. So using Customizer is a way that we can get all this information stored in a database and then bring it back into Math for forms and for Explorer views and for a process. But we've not touched your database. So when you go to upgrade your system, this upgrades right along with it, which is why we highly recommend, if you need to modify and add information, that you don't change the core stuff, that you use Customizer, and you store that information in your own table so that when we need to upgrade, not a problem. Donna, I think you wanted to say something?
Yes, the only module that integrates really well with the customizer is the data porter.
Absolutely.
Once you put this customized table or this customized field for the long name, that if you were to actually use data porter, this field will show up so that you can use your data porter for more than just, use the customizer and the data porter hand in hand.
Well, what I'm struggling with is the UDS just kind of show up wherever they want to, and I'm trying to get them to go where I want them to display on the screen.
Absolutely. And who is this that's speaking?
Sorry, this is Chris from United Trucking Equipment. We're not live yet.
Oh, no, that's no problem, Chris. So great question. You can modify that. So within Customizer just doesn't really care what the information is. So there are areas like, let's say, maintain items, where there's a button to get to your custom fields, but you want it displayed here. That's okay.
Right.
You can do that. So this field, if you look at your mass edit properties, it's gone. But let's say you decide that I don't like where this is, so I'm going to create my own interface into, and I'll show you this right now, into a custom field. So I'm just going to pull out this thing, and I'm going to drop this sucker in here. And again, I like to test user field 1, Josh's, whatever you want to put in there. You can data bind right back to the vendor tap, vendor, good Lord, table, and go down and find that user field.
Uh-huh.
And if you notice the relationship, the parent table relationship is grayed out because Mass already knows that's what you are. So now when I exit this bad boy, hit cancel GEC01, and I think I did too. It isn't used. What basically happens, and I should have modified this to pull in user field 1 instead of user field 2, but the system will just display both of those as methods to get to that information. It's not going to let me because that user field is already being used on the screen. Isn't that correct, Donna? It has to not be on the screen already?
That's correct.
So
easier would be if you just look at the 1099, if it's got the vendor key on it, you can bring in other tables so that you don't have to jump screens.
Yep. So Customizer, and what we're saying to you, Chris, is that you can link it to existing information. What I forgot, and I should have remembered, and it was the moment that I did it, is that if that field's already on the screen, you cannot add it again. So it won't allow us to duplicate a link back to an existing field.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's not, I understand where you're going.
Okay,
Mine
cool.
is with the sales order header because it doesn't have a lot of room, and I want to add 3 fields to the sales order header.
Yep, can totally do it. And you can expand it and make it work the way you need to think.
Yeah, I
With that,
didn't realize I could resize these frames either. So
oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Problem.
Yeah, just be aware that Mass's architecture is in .NET, and although it may not mean to anyone to anything, it means that some of the behaviors of the actual fields and the screen sizes, these things that they call frames, can be manipulated by the user. So if I have a certain individual in an organization who really loves to put their font on 84 for whatever reason, and I've modified the screen and I've moved these frames and I've done this, and all of a sudden they open up the screen and they're like, gee, capital is 900 point font. It's over to the left and it's taking over, and they start talking to you about how this screen, even though it's working on everyone else's computer, on theirs is insane. You can go into the preferences of that computer, and if they've done something, and again, Donna could probably maybe provide more insight, but what I found is I cannot find a direct correlation. There is not a point at which my modifications and the defaults that a user can set for their screen resolution have a point. It will be, someone will call me and say, it's moved all the way to the left, it's doing this, and I'll go in and I'll modify, and I'll say, okay, we are not going to use large icons, we're going to use medium icons, and all of a sudden everything clears up. And I can't correlate that, so there's nothing that says, if you modify this or if you customize this and you set it to this size or that size, then it's going to have a problem. It really is based on the user experience. So just be aware that the defaults that people have on their screen resolution can impact the way your customizations will display. Donna, can you provide more insight on that?
Well, it's like my screen, since I need glasses. Well, it's true. And so I have the resolution and the font type larger on my regular Windows display. So when I activate the Math 500, I get an extra width on like the header bar. So mine looks slightly different than everybody else's. So
yeah, just be aware that it has an impact.
That I have because I need glasses. So sorry.
So just tell people, you know, it's better to just invest in bigger monitors. Stop messing with the resolution. Just give them that 60-inch screen TV, and then your customizations are going to work perfectly. And trust me, it is random. So, Chris, it's not a consistent thing. I wish I could say. Other than that, within Customizer, and this goes into the next level, are you guys all doing okay? Are there any questions out there? I can see Julie was talking to someone privately. I don't know who, what, why. Are there any questions at this point? No? Okay.
Oh, Josh?
Yes.
If you were to click the help screen from the Customizer.
Yep, absolutely. Here we go. Boop.
One of the neat things that Sage always provides are samples.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have some Customizer examples,
yep,
then
right
you
here.
can look at it right. Some of the things that you can do, which is you can put defaults in there. You can put in, like if you need a calculator, or you can put in different things that you can do with it. And these examples, I think, are excellent.
And with us as your partner, there are lots of things that we've done. We just had one of our coworkers today come up with a button that when you push it, validates the address on the screen, the current address on the screen, to the United States Postal Service automatically, and then responds back and tells you if it's a valid address. So there's a lot of things that you can do in Customizer. It's just a matter of you guys talking with us and sending an email to myself, Donna, Becky, Stuart, or anyone else that we might add, and saying, here's a business need. I'm trying to accomplish this. How could it be done? But understand that there are things and the benefit, really the reason why we'll push Customizer as much as we possibly can. You can upgrade, and these just go right along with it.
Yeah.
So we've not modified anything core to Math 500 that is going to impede your ability to upgrade on a regular basis, which is something that we're all just super aware of because there are features that are coming up that are just immense. But yeah, so like what Donna's saying is that within Help there are additional functions, and that is really linking into this function called the scripting function. So those of you who have dealt with VB script language, this is where you can create drop-downs and then create the information that feeds into those drop-downs, whether it be a connection to a database, which can be fun, or if it can just be an adding the defaults, yes and no. You know, if you have yes or no, use the checkbox, but all the same. But you'll get those either Customizer examples here. You can Google search. So if you Google search the older, this is VB6, so be aware, ask questions. But a lot of the controls and functions, this is how we were able to add the address verification, can be done within the script editor. And this goes really into a higher level functionality. But if there are people who have specific requests and needs, myself, Donna, or anyone of the team will be more than willing to get together with you and specifically walk you through how to use the script editor, how to add this control, why this works the way it does. Not something we can lunch and learn in an hour, let me tell you.
Josh, what we can do, now we all have users that are in there, can you show them how to, we all have a user that for some reason during an implement or they forget a field, sometimes if you just simply put a background color on it, that it draws the user's attention to that area.
Ooh, good idea.
That they can use it. So I heard that somebody is implementing at this point, and what we want to make sure is that they will always put in, say, the taxpayer ID. So you could simply highlight the field, and then you can tell someone that, you know, one of your users, or, you know, fill out the yellow box. That's all you have to do is do the yellow box. And you can turn it on and off, but it's just a helpful thing.
Yeah, you're going to find that I'm the more tactile guy. I'm like, so there's the field, and there's Donna. You can have bows, you can have ribbons, it can have an arrow, it can. And I'm like, wow, if only I had the ability to come up with all that stuff. But it's really helpful. I just never think of it. I'm like, they should know it's right there on the screen. But yeah, so you can, like she was saying, change the font, foreground, the color. You can do a lot within. The customizer product is really versatile. And the nice thing is that you find that this provides just a level of usability because, again, you should really have your ERP do what you need. Additionally, the other thing that I would say, Donna, and please chime in as well, if you have integrations with other systems where you have things that sync or you have additional information about an item or a vendor that is helpful or needs to be an additional system, I highly recommend the idea that your Mass 500 system is sort of the sun to that integration. So it is better to add, in my opinion, the fields that are needed to integrate with other systems into Mass if it's going to be pulling, let's say, your vendor information. Don't add it into other systems. Add those fields in here. Make that maintenance in your Mass. You can add tabs in here. You can do things that you need to do in order to modify Mass so that it will talk to and communicate to your integrated system, but your user experience all stays in one central location. Go into Mass, add this to this item, put this long description, you know, add this function to this vendor, and now it will appear on our website, or now it will show up in our Concur solution. Whatever it may be, this is where you can do that. And for this particular one, I'll give you an example. I'm going to pop out over here. We did customize their sales order system to let us know when it got synced, and that is an actual additional field that pops up when we go into sales order. Boop. And we've done some crazy stuff with customers, right, Donna?
Oh, yeah.
And it's really entertaining. The whole core of this is that in the usability structure, we just want it to come up and make nice. Boop, boop, boop. Wait for it to go. So this, what ended up happening is, and I put it under the header and let's custom fields. So these are not actually their custom fields that are linked directly to Mass 500, even though they display there, because the length of their unique identifier was too long. So this is actually a customization to this screen in order to let us know if it was synced to Prolog with a drop-down, yes or no, and their unique identifier when they sync to their third-party system. That's all held here so that if they have questions about their order, they can go in here. And even though it's representing like it's Mass, it's actually custom fields. And if you want to see oh, go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
On the other part that I have done, I've done a lot of things where you have different user groups, like on the maintain customer. You don't necessarily want your sales order people to be establishing. You want them to enter the customer in, but you don't necessarily want them to establish a credit limit or to type that in. So you can, for the user groups, you simply hide that field so that they can't see it and they can't edit what they can't see. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it becomes a way to control security that you say, okay, you know, they can't change the credit limit. You know, you can bring in the examples that they provide, you can put, you know, customer information. You can bring in current balances and different aspects of it that, you know, people can't edit or change what they can't see. And then you can also bring in additional fields from other applications and then have a one-stop type of deal. So it makes it very integratable.
And it's the same thing with like posting. That's another part that I've done as well. We've just gotten rid of the button that says you can post for certain groups. It's amazing.
Or if you always want to print a report in detail rather than in summary, and it's easier just to change the default. You can use the customizer to auto-populate and to create defaults for you, depending on your business.
I'm always surprised as we go into these things how quickly an hour goes when you're trying to convey information. But I'm hoping, because I try to be conscious of the time, that you guys sort of see that there's some inherent flexibility, that it really is user-driven. So although you may see your consultants as the people who like to, you know, do all the work, we really are here to also provide some insights on how you can modify, how you can change, and how you can better utilize your system without reliance on us, and that there are tools out there and available through Sage that will really help you with your experience, and we're more than willing to partner up and help you implement some of the changes through these applications that are completely controlled by you, and quite honestly, for me, are very easy to use. And I know that Julie and Keith have been muted for a while, so I just want to make sure there aren't any questions out there, or there aren't any, and it can be just business-related questions. How would I use it to do this? I was thinking about it being used to help me with this process, and I'm more than willing to answer those. And Don is a master, so please feel free to ask.
I do have a quick question, if I could ask.
Of course.
On the maintain routing window, on the detail tab, it has the material item, and it shows the short description, and I wanted to add a box with the long description. So I tried to follow along while you were doing the data binding, but the only table it gives me to connect to is the routing head table instead of the routing detail table.
Yep.
So if we have to connect, you know, into 1 or 2 levels deep, we still do that through Customizer, or is it only 1 level deep?
I would have to look, but I believe you're only going to be 1 level deep. So whatever screen it's on, whatever parent table that is, whatever we want to link to has to exist in that parent table. So let's go in there real quick. And is this Keith?
Yeah.
All right. So I don't think we have I don't know that I have manufacturing on this system. In fact, I'm almost sure I don't, because I'm not an SOA. But Keith, what I can do is I can get together with you specifically, because and Donna, maybe you might know, I thought the routing head does not have items. It's in the routing detail.
I'm on the next version up on the detail screen for the maintain routing. I'm going to see if I can get to the data binding. So let's see.
Okay, and then Julie, you had a question. You're still muted. That you need to edit a 1099 form. The name box is too far to the right. Is that actually when it prints out the form? And now we have that dead pause as she waits for the answer. So I'm going to go ahead a little bit here, Julie. And if it's on the form, no, I have no microphone. I love you. Okay, so Julie, if it's on the business form, up here in Common Information, Maintenance, CI Setup, Business Forms, is a little bitty lookup. And we can go out there, and on here is your 1099 forms. So here's your dividend, interest, and miscellaneous. It's using this miscellaneous form. So if we click on that miscellaneous form, here's the form name, and then you have the ability to click the design button to make the modifications that you want. So it'll pop up on the screen, and it'll look something like this, where we have Crystal Reports. And then here is your company name or your box 1, 2. So this is where you just go in there and move this around. Now be aware that, and this is central, there are 2 ways to implement MAS 500 reporting. And so if you make this change the way I just showed you, and you are linked to only the reports on your system, then the 1099s are going to print correctly from your system, but nowhere else. So you might want to reach out to your consultant to see if basically what we're looking for is where those forms are saved, if that's being saved locally on your system, and thus we need to update, or if we've implemented sort of unified reporting in MAS 500, which is basically taking all of the MAS 500 core forms, putting them out on a localized server, and then having all of the users point back to that. If that's the case, then you're going to be fine, because when you click the design, it's going to modify the 1099 in that unified location, where right now this will fix it for you, but the next time you go to print it, or if you print it from another workstation, this won't be changed. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So, and as just a random sidebar, if you ask that question, well, how do I know exactly how I've been set up? It will be under your users, and under the specific user, being me, of course, under Josh. If you're out there and you go into your C, Users, Josh, and then you click into the, why isn't this not showing my, no, I don't think I've ever done this for myself. I need to, I love the new interface, but sometimes I forget like where they, you always show, show hidden files, click. I just had to show the hidden files. So under app data, so I'm in C, users, Josh, app data, and then, or I think it's roaming, Sage software, Sage MAS 500, is this wonderful little application.config. If I open this up with choose a default, if I want to browse out, oh crap. Let's see if it'll just open. I need Notepad. But basically, this little bad boy, if it opens up for us, kilos. Open with choose a default. Browse. I just love it when I have to search for stuff. It's just ridiculous. And then click Notepad, click OK. And then it's right here. It says report path. And what you'll find is that with people who have a shared directory, this will say like // my localized server. But just to let you know that it's there. Random sidebar, not really into Customizer, but it is about customizing reports. So Donna, I think you were going to look at the routing. Did you actually have that? Have a moment to take a look at that for Keith?
Yes, I did. It is at a single level on the material item. For that, the only way for him to get that description on that material item to be the long description is to use a script to populate it. So there is a way to do it, but you would have to use part of the scripting. It can't be bound to the upper level.
Okay.
There's a level down.
Right. So Keith, basically what we're saying is you need to work with Donna, and she can help you with that particular request.
Okay.
But there's always a way, and the best thing to do is if we can do it in Customizer, again, it just secures you for upgrades.